What's up everyone, Soldier First Class here, and today's mission, I have the honor of bringing you our very first class review, and what better game for that review than Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'd like to start today's video by thanking Square Enix for providing me with the review code for the game and making this review video possible. Keep in mind, this review was done on a PlayStation 4 Pro on normal difficulty and will be as spoiler free as possible. To avoid spoilers, I'll only be showing footage from Square Enix released material and nothing that I captured from the game itself. After 5 long years, Final Fantasy VII Remake is finally here, but was it worth the wait? In my time with the game, Final Fantasy VII Remake put me on a roller coaster of emotions. From laughing out loud to almost crying, this was truly an experience that I will never forget. However, the game isn't perfect, and we'll be discussing those details as well in today's review. With every review, you have to take the good with the bad, and as much as I love Final Fantasy VII and this remake, there were some issues that I do want to talk about. That being said, if you're expecting this to be the same old Midgar and that you can't spoil a 23-year-old game, that could not be further from the truth. So many new characters and story elements were introduced in this first part, and there's a lot of spoilers that can be found. Even if you think you know what's going to happen, you really don't know until you complete the game, and even then, you still really don't know. I'm not allowed to talk about the ending right now, but will do so at a later time. Although I will say this, sometimes scenes play out the way you expect them to based off the original's blueprint, but there are new scenes and variants of old scenes that play out completely different. And for those wondering, I'll get this out of the way immediately. My first full playthrough was over 50 hours, and I still hadn't completed every single thing, but I wanted to get this review out on time. So needless to say, this is a complete and full game, it just happens to not be the full story. But trust me when I say this, you will not be starved for content by any means. Much like any series, it will have its sequels, which will be the same length or longer in terms of content. For me, the new content felt natural and flowed really well with the old story plot points. New characters felt like they were always supposed to be there, and their interactions with the party were phenomenal to watch. And that takes us to the first part of this review, the writing. If I were to rate the writing on its own merit, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. The focus on the lore, the characters, and the world around them is some of the best I've ever experienced. The voice acting of Final Fantasy VII Remake is also top-notch. The English voice cast brought life to these characters that I've never heard before. Each character interaction felt incredible, and they really captured the essence and charm of the original characters. I loved every single character and NPC, and found myself laughing a lot during certain scenes and dialogue exchanges. There were also subtle nods to lines from the original, and it was cool seeing these little references occasionally. The voice acting complements the amazing writing extremely well, and I felt like these characters were more human by the time I finished the game. The interactions between characters was also perfect, and they definitely help build the relationships between characters as they grow and evolve across the game. I'd also like to point out that the game is not censored at all. To its credit, it felt like they were swearing as much as possible while still keeping the T rating. It wasn't over the top or unnatural in any way, but it's a bit jarring at first when you hear characters talking the way they do in this game. The world they live in is dark and cruel, and this type of language humanizes these characters in a clearly fantasy setting. One of the major highlights of the writing was getting to know Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge on a more personal level. Throughout the game, you learn their motivations, some of their backstories, and even take on missions with them. You don't get to play as them, unfortunately, but hearing their banner during combat segments really adds another element to their characters that has you loving them more and more than ever before. A lot of people were worried that there would be major story changes, and there definitely are some, and hardcore purists will dislike these things, but if you go into this game with an open mind, you're going to enjoy how these events unfold for the most part. Some of the changes were even for the better, and some of the twists had me in absolute shock, and sometimes tearing up when they were revealed. You can also tell that this game was written as the first part in a multi-part series because there's a lot of foreshadowing going on, which will lead into the next part. Needless to say, when we're done with this game, there's going to be a lot of speculation on what will or won't unfold in part 2. I also want you to know that what you see when you play the game may not be what you think it is, so don't take every detail you see at face value. Speaking of world building, Wall Market may have been my favorite location in the game. It feels like a tourist attraction, but at the same time, the seedy underbelly of organized crime. Almost all of the original game's side quests here are exactly the same, and there's a few Easter eggs for fans of the original to find here. Corneo's Coliseum is also an extremely fun attraction, and one you'll want to visit several times throughout the game. It's well worth your time to do so, I might add. Wall Market is also the location where a lot of the new characters are located, Madam M being my favorite for, reasons. But every new character was extremely well written, and the atmosphere of Wall Market was captured perfectly. It's also worth noting that you'll come across choices in the game that directly impact what happens later in the story. I won't go into what these choices are, but there is a cause and effect to certain ones. Okay, so just so I don't get too excited and want to talk spoilers with you guys, let's move on to the combat. Final Fantasy VII Remake may have the greatest combat system I have ever played, and I'm not even fanboying, that is 100% my true opinion. The depth and balance that the game features is unparalleled for me. The ATB system implemented in this game is balanced and makes strategy a priority. From the right materia combinations and the right equipment, to properly sizing up each and every enemy, the combat system keeps you on your toes throughout the whole game. You'll need to make sure you go into each encounter prepared for anything that comes your way. I cannot stress enough that this game is not a hack and slash, and if you go into it with that mentality, you're going to learn that lesson the hard way. Even on normal difficulty, this game can be sometimes downright brutal, but in a good way. I got so many game overs at times I stopped counting, and that's more than I can say for the entirety of Final Fantasy 15. In fact, I don't remember if I've ever even seen the game over screen in 15 to be honest. This game promotes being prepared, and not having the right materia or weapon for the job can prove fatal even in normal encounters. Which, by the way, enemies do respawn and allow for grinding certain areas. I'll be doing a best places to grind guide sometime this week as well. The weapon upgrade system really made a difference too, as you can feel every time your weapon increases its abilities. It has passive effects on your characters when equipped, and can be the difference between victory and a game over screen. The materia system was also simple, but deep at the same time. New materia like the deadly dodge was extremely useful early, and as other combat evolving materia was unlocked, the combat became even more fun. Pro tip, assess materia will be your best friend and is key to completing certain side quests. You'll not only gain abilities from materia, but also ATB abilities from your weapons. Once you've equipped a weapon, it features a Final Fantasy IX type system where you learn the ability as you use it. Master the ability and you can switch back to your weapon of choice or continue upgrading the weapon you're using. Unlike most systems where you can abandon old attacks for newer ones, this system still has uses for old abilities. You start off with Braver, and because it's a faster version of a later, more powerful ability, it's more useful against faster moving enemies. Some attacks require a lot of build-up, and that means you'll be left open more often. Characters can get knocked back during build-ups of their attacks, and if that happens, it cancels the attack but still uses the ATB charges. Some people were worried about the stagger system, but I have to say I absolutely love this take on it. It's no surprise to anyone that I didn't like Final Fantasy 13, but this is one mechanic I'm glad they brought over. Certain ATB abilities sacrifice damage output for stagger percentages, and you'll need to balance damage and stagger attacks to optimize your damage output. This will be a major key to victory, and the right materia setup can help with this as well. Different enemy types are staggered by different methods, which is why the assess materia is so important. I also can't sing enough praise about the summoning system. As much as people criticized it at first, it ended up being everything I wanted and more. I felt so in control of every single aspect of combat, and summons were no different. They aren't only limited to boss fights either, as I noticed some non-boss fights having summons able to be used. There were so many boss fights anyway that you had a lot of opportunities to summon them. Keep in mind, I had a pre-release version, so I wasn't able to test out the DLC summons just yet. I won't reveal which summons actually made the game, as there are a few surprises in there for fans to find, but one does require the completion of a side quest to find, but I'll let you figure that one out. I'll be making a guide for that one as well. Also, I want to point out that almost every summon is missable except for the one you're automatically given, so you won't just be handed rewards just because of a story mission. You'll actually have to go out and do the work to get them. Enemy types are super varied, and it's not just about weakness and elemental resistance. Some enemies change strategy on the fly to counter what you're doing. Some enemies even move too quickly for you to cast your most powerful spells. Needless to say, the game forces you to adapt and overcome, and that's more strategy than any hack and slash game I've ever played. Difficulty in Final Fantasy games is hard to come by, but they did a phenomenal job with Final Fantasy VII Remake in that department. Boss fights are a massive improvement from the original game, and are even more dangerous than ever before. They go in phases, where sometimes they'll stick to one strategy, and then when they get to a certain HP, they'll change strategy on the fly and do the unexpected. I had multiple bosses that took me forever to get through because I didn't have the right materia or my strategy wasn't right for the job. I'm actually happy the game punished me because I didn't want to breeze through it either. I can't imagine how insanely difficult hard mode is if normal punished me. There are a lot of interlocking systems in the combat alone, and they do an incredible job of making sure those systems are balanced and work properly. Staggering is the best it's ever been in the series, and the materia system is still a major component for survival. You won't be disappointed by the depth and strategic nature of the combat. Now that we've gone over the writing and combat, let's talk about the exploration a little bit. This was a big one for some fans, and admittedly, the game is fairly linear, which to be honest, so was the original until much later in the game. That remains true here for the most part. Every few chapters, you'll be let loose to explore certain sectors of Midgar and build your reputation in those sectors. The more quests you complete, the better rewards you receive. You may also receive special cutscenes in those areas should you choose to complete them all in that area. These quests are entirely optional, but the rewards you receive are well worth it and do have an impact on how certain events it's played out. Chapter 14 was the best example of this, as travel wasn't limited to just one sector. You could go back to several different areas you previously explored and even complete new side quests that were unlocked. Keep in mind, yes, there are fetch quests, but for the most part, it doesn't really feel that way. The interactions with NPCs giving these side quests built on the world and the lore of the game, so it was worth my time doing them. For those worried about the endgame and not having much there are bosses that will test your limits and capabilities in combat. I wouldn't necessarily call them super bosses, but they can be extremely tough fights and push me to the limit. Minigames are also a nice part of the exploration, as places like Corneo's Coliseum and the Seventh Heaven feature fun minigames with great rewards for completing them. Even the Squats minigame features some great rewards. These are fun minigames that are challenging, but aren't overly difficult, so unlike Final Fantasy X's minigames, there shouldn't be any controller breaking here. Even though the game is fairly linear, it's still fun to walk down the streets of Midgar and just take in the sights. Locations are beautifully crafted and the lighting is almost perfect. Whether it's day, night, exterior, or interior, the lighting sets the tone for a lot of the game. You can look at the plate from underneath while exploring the slums, and the plate and pillars are incredibly detailed and really make Midgar look and feel like a real city. Wall Market is also incredibly detailed, and each part of the city has its own unique aesthetic and feel to it. Now I want to talk about something, and I saved the best for last: the soundtrack. I cannot tell you how many times I stayed in a certain part of the game just to listen to the music. It's so dynamic and has so many different versions of familiar tracks, it's becoming one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. They did a fantastic job of setting up every moment and making every scene magical just based off the sound alone. Each area had its own battle theme, and when the moment called for it, the music made sure the tonality of the scene was felt. To be honest, the music felt like its own character at times. Now that we've discussed everything I love about the game, now it's time to get to the criticisms I have of it. Keep in mind, there's likely a day one patch, one releasing as I'm talking to you right now, that may fix all or some of these problems, so keep in mind these are pre-release notes. One of my complaints was the camera. If you were out in the open or a wide open area, it was great. Interior areas were not so great though. I found myself getting automatic zoom-ins and not being able to see what was going on or where my opponent was. Sometimes the lock-on feature doesn't help either, and in some cases made the problem worse. Overall though, it wasn't a horrible experience with the camera, but just something to be aware of when you're inside locations. The map also needs a little work as well. I'm fine with needing to follow instructions instead of getting my hand held, but if you're going to hold my hand, lead me to the right place at least. Sometimes the map would not be a good indication of where the quest marker actually was, and caused me to do some backtracking in the hopes that I was in the right area. I didn't notice this being a major problem all the time, but it was another issue I had at times. As great as the soundtrack and sound effects are, I noticed audio mixing was an issue at times. Some scenes I was really glad I had subtitles on because I couldn't hear over the music or the crowd noise. This caused me to have to read the scene because I could see the characters' lips moving but not hear them speaking. This was especially bad in a specific scene in Chapter 2, and then again later in a scene in Wall Market. This was also minor as it didn't really happen very often. There was also some minor padding issues in the story as well. I didn't mind them as much as some, but there were a few times where a specific dungeon wore out its welcome. The good news is that there isn't a lot of this, and each dungeon still felt well done, but there's just still minor cases of it. The final issue I had was the textures, and apparently I'm not the only one. This was a really strange one for me because I felt like the demo and the final game's version of the bombing mission were extremely polished. But then I get past that mission and I started noticing texture pop-ins and cutscenes and during walking around segments. One location even featured a scene that looked like a pre-rendered background from the PS2 era. These issues didn't break my enjoyment of the game, but hopefully the game's day one patch fixes this issue, or I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of fans tearing this issue to shreds. These were honestly just minor nitpicks and nothing that destroyed my fun with the game, but like I said earlier, I have to do my due diligence for you guys and voice concerns that I had with it. Overall, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a wonderful experience for both newcomers and veterans alike. There's definitely a lot of nostalgia to be had, but the game is extremely fresh and ambitious in what it does do. I also have a feeling this game will be very divisive, but again, it wouldn't be Final Fantasy if it didn't ruffle a few feathers. There are plenty of surprises, twists, and everything in between that make Final Fantasy VII Remake a must-play. Even with some minor technical issues, the game is extremely fun, and the good far outweighs any minor issues the game may have. I have a feeling that this remake project will be a good start, but much like the original Star Wars trilogy, Part 2 will be everyone's favorite. My final score for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 is a 9.5 out of 10. I gave it this score for phenomenal storytelling, the best battle system I've ever played, and a masterful soundtrack. Keep in mind my score is subject to change in the event that some of my issues with the game are fixed with a patch and could possibly earn a 10 out of 10. So let me ask you one more time, soldiers, are you excited for Final Fantasy VII Remake? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to Omni-slash that like button. Let me know in the comments section below if you're excited to get your hands on Final Fantasy VII Remake, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell to join the ranks of Soldier today. And for all the latest Final Fantasy VII Remake news, rumors, trailers, and content, I'm Soldier First Class, and I'm on to the next mission. Later, guys.